Special conditions are a very niche aspect of the Pokemon TCG. There are various different special conditions in the game, however most of them do the same thing just a little differently. These special conditions can be very useful in certain instances. Some can stun opponents' Pokemon, preventing them from attacking or retreating, and others can inflict damage to your opponent's Pokemon each turn. There has rarely ever been decks that purely rely on special conditions as part of their game plan. The only decks that come to mind are Blacephalon GX, which could both burn and confuse your opponent's Pokemon, as well as Hisuian Electrode V, which deals 100 damage for each special condition it is inflicted with. Some cards have seen a lot of competitive play for their ability to inflict special conditions, such as Hypnotoxic Laser combined with Verbank City Gym in the Black and White era. With the announcement of Shrouded Fable, we also saw the reveal of a new card that could see play as our next special condition deck, more specifically a Poison deck. Combined with other cards, this new card has the ability to heavily increase the damage from the poison status, while also locking your opponent's active Pokemon, making them unable to retreat and remove said status condition. It also has the ability to win the game on the very first turn, this card being the promo card you obtain from purchasing the set's Elite Trainer box, or from purchasing the free booster pack blister, Pecharunt, an 80 HP Darkness type Pokemon boasting an incredibly strong ability as well as an attack. Before we look at its ability, let's take a look at the attack. For 1 Darkness and 1 Colourless, it does a gigantic 10 damage, but it also applies some additional effects. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned and it can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. So for 2 energy, it does 20 damage, since during your opponent's turn, they will take an extra 10 damage from the poison. This doesn't sound that good, but this Pokemon's ability makes your poison damage even stronger, to the point you could win the game before your opponent even takes their first turn. Its ability, Toxic Subjugation, says that as long as Pecharunt is in the active spot, put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup. This ability is incredibly strong, turning Pecharunt's attack from 20 damage with poison to 70 damage with poison, and to top it off, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So when the turn passes back over to you, that Pokemon will take an additional 60 damage if your opponent doesn't find a switch card to move it out of the active. By itself, this card is really strong. However, when combined with other cards, it becomes incredibly powerful and very toxic. As I said earlier, you have the potential to win the game before your opponent even has the chance to play. However, by itself, this card won't be able to achieve that victory, but with the support of other cards, it becomes very easy to set up. 2 of the key cards needed for this strategy to work are Radiant Hisuian Sneasler as well as Perilous Jungle. These 2 cards, very much like Pecharunt, also increase the damage Pokemon take from poison, adding 2 damage counters each for a total of 4 additional damage counters. However, do keep in mind that Perilous Jungle doesn't affect Darkness type Pokemon. These 2 cards, when combined with Pecharunt, lead to a huge 100 damage every turn just from poison. As long as Pecharunt is in the active and constantly attacking, your opponent will be taking huge poison damage every turn, and because of Pecharunt's attack, that Pokemon can't retreat, meaning your opponent needs to find a switch card or some way to get that Pokemon out of the active spot. Otherwise, it will swiftly be knocked out by the accumulating poison damage. However, how exactly does this help you win in a single turn, since you need to poison your opponent's active Pokemon, and you can't use Pecharunt's attack if you go first. Plus, there aren't really any item cards that can poison your opponent's active, plus you can't use a supporter going first, so how? Well, there is one card that can poison your opponent's active Pokemon, Brute Bonnet from Paradox Rift. Its ability, Toxic Powder, says that if it has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, you can poison both active Pokemon. So here is how the strategy works. You go first, establish a board of Pecharunt in the active, as well as Brute Bonnet on the bench with an Ancient Booster attached. You also have Perilous Jungle active, and Radiant Hisuian Sneasler also on your bench. You use Brute Bonnet's ability to poison both active Pokemon, and then end your turn. Your opponent's active Pokemon will take 100 poison damage, which depending on the Pokemon is more than enough for a knockout, and if they didn't bench any other Pokemon before starting the game, then congratulations, you win. While this strategy sounds incredibly strong as well as very annoying for your opponent, it won't work 100% of the time, as it does have a lot of downsides. Obviously the biggest one being, what if your opponent has a Pokemon with more than 100 HP in the active? Then the strategy just won't KO the Pokemon, but it will receive a huge amount of damage, and if not moved out of the active, it will be knocked out once your next turn begins. Plus the ability to deal a large amount of damage going first is really strong. The second downside being, how do you expect to get so many specific cards into play? Well, it's not hard, but it's not easy. Obviously search cards can grab you Pokemon you may need. You could also use cards such as Squawkabilly to discard your hand and draw more cards, helping you find missing pieces. Lumineon V can grab you Carmine, which is a supporter card you can use on your first turn of the game, to discard your hand and draw more cards. Trekking Shoes can help dig through your deck. Forest Seal Stone, which you can attach to Lumineon in order to grab any card from your deck. Or if you want to grab everything you need from a single card, you can use Secret Box. At the cost of discarding 3 cards, you can search for an item card, a Pokemon tool, a supporter, and a stadium, basically giving you everything you need to pull off the combo. However, the strategy's third problem is Pokemon that can't be affected by special conditions. Ancient Booster stops ancient Pokemon from being inflicted, and a new card we recently received, Festival Grounds, says that Pokemon with any energy attached can't be afflicted by special conditions. So in that case, you can rely on the deck's backup option, Okidoki EX, which for 2 darkness and a colourless can deal 130 damage. But if it's poisoned, which can either be achieved by its first attack or by Brute Bonnet, adds an additional 130 damage to its attack for a total of 260, which is really strong and an incredible attacker for the deck. This card, as well as the tools and support it has available to it, makes it very, very strong as well as very toxic. The ability to win the game before your opponent even starts their first turn is insane. Obviously the deck isn't going to work every time, as you do need to have a very specific setup of cards, so if any of them end up prized or you aren't able to dig through your deck enough to get everything you need, then the strategy is going to end up failing. But even if it does, you're still dealing a maximum of 100 poison damage every turn for the rest of the game, as long as they don't cure it. Plus you have access to a super strong attacker in Okidogi EX, hitting for a huge 260 damage. Plus if your opponent's active is poisoned, that's an additional 50 damage for a total of 310 if you have some of the extra Pokemon and support in play. This deck has the ability to compete, especially since the best decks in the format play evolution line Pokemon as well as support Pokemon with very low HP. Charmander, Pidgey, Frigibax, Beldum, Dreepy, Comfey, Bidoof, Minccino, Manaphy, etc, etc. This deck is something to be on the lookout for. It has so many strengths with its ability to win during the first turn. It has access to huge hitting attackers, as well as the ability to deal large amounts of tick damage every turn. And it can deal damage on the very first turn of the game. But it also has its weaknesses, as it has a bad matchup against certain decks that can prevent special conditions, and also requires a lot of specific cards to be in play in order to pull off its signature strategy. Needless to say, this card, as well as this deck, will see competitive play. People call stall decks toxic for not letting you play the game, but this deck is the definition of toxic.